So here's my garage. Ignore the structure for now. I'll get to that. That's the point of this. 15-foot ceilings. We needed storage space. The original idea was to build a structure over here on top of the garage doors. I have roughly 4 feet of space, as a lot of people do. Apparently it's fairly common to put some sort of storage system, a ceiling mounted storage system, above the garage doors. It's out of the way, it's wasted space otherwise, so great idea. Had a guy come out, quoted roughly $700 for a 39-inch deep, I think it was somewhere around 20 feet wide, shelf. You know, that's not a lot of money to pay for the amount of work involved in attaching this thing. But in the meantime, I did enough research to realize that that's not really a good idea. You have a lot of weight limitations. When you go with a ceiling mounted structure, the joists are just not intended to have weight hanging from them. So I didn't really want those limitations, so as a result I decided on a floor supported platform, which is what we have here, or loft as it were, whatever you want to call it. Once it gets to a certain size, you can't really call it shelf anymore, and I believe I have exceeded that. So once the decision was made to go to a floor supported system, I went to the internet for information, and surprisingly I found very little information on, you know, just the nuts and bolts of how to build such a thing. Whether YouTube, blogs, whatever, they're really only pictures followed up with a solicitation to go to the website, purchase plans, hire a firm if it's an engineering firm, or just simply a construction company. It was just difficult to find any information on, here's an example, here's how to do it. And anyone with the ability to read a tape measure and run a skill saw can do such a thing, but you still have to know the basics of how to do it. Look at a detailed picture, see how someone else did it. And that's all I was looking for, and that's all that's needed to figure out how to do this. So now that mine is done, I thought I would give someone else this information so you don't have to figure the whole thing out on your own like I did. You know, luckily for me, I have a friend that's a structural engineer, and I have a dad that knows all about building this type of thing. So together with them, I was able to get a part list, do the measurements, go to the local supply store, had everything waiting, and my dad and I built this in one day, and we just finished it, so I wanted to do this before we got anything on it. So here we have it. This is basically just a deck built in a garage is what I have. Again, the ceilings in my garage are 15 feet, so I came down roughly 4 feet, I think, from the top. Actually, I don't even know what the top dimension is. It's 8 foot tall at the top, so looks like I have about 4 feet. So again, this is basically a deck. It's 34 feet wide, 8 feet tall. Starting at the back, these are 2x8s for the ledger board. So the ledger board is made up, obviously, of several 2x8s. I'll just go through here. Here's one splice. Here, that's a 12-foot board there with a splice. So we have another 12-foot board. That splice ends there. And then another 12-foot. The splice is there, and then that left us, you know, roughly 3 feet or so to get to the end. So this is yellow pine. Apparently, once you hit the 2x8 dimension, it switches over from whitewood, which is what these 2x6s are and most 2x4s, to yellow pine in the 2x8, and that's because it's a stronger wood, much stronger than whitewood, and that became very important for this front fascia board. So going back to the ledger board for now. First step was to find the studs, obviously using a stud finder. I found every stud along the whole wall, marked them off, and then put the boards up. And if you do any research on how to hang a ledger board, lags are the way to go. So that's what we have here. In every stud, you'll have 2 lag bolts all the way down. I am told by my structural engineer friend that that's an overkill, but again, I didn't want any weight restrictions on this thing, so I went all the way. Now, when I went to get the lag bolts, I was getting a traditional lag bolt that was the bolt, and you have to put a washer on it. You then pre-drill a hole through this whole thing, and then you run it in. Now notice it's a hex head bolt, so some of these do have some wood screws in it. When we first started, we were gonna do wood screws and lag bolts, but then when we realized how easy the lag bolts are, we decided to abandon the wood screws and went with all lags. So it's a hex head bolt. These are 7/16 head, and once I got to the store to buy these things, apparently there are lots of new technologies on these, and you don't have to get traditional lag bolts with separate washers and pre-drill holes. They have these things over here called SPAX, S-P-A-X, if you can see that. These are 5/16, 4 inches long. Now, when I was in there, the advertisement is that they are as strong, actually stronger. These are supposedly stronger than 1/2 inch traditional lag bolts. And they come with, let's see if you can see this, has a washer built on it. So you don't have to buy a washer, and you don't have to pre-drill. That's one of the big time-saving issues here. So 4 inches long, 7/16 on the head, 5/16 thickness, stronger than a 1/2 inch traditional lag, no pre-drilling. So I can absolutely attest to the ease of putting these things in. They work great. There is absolutely no need for pre-drilling. These puppies just went in like they were a tiny screw, as long as you have a good drill motor, that is. So put your ledger board in with all lags, those type of lags, so you don't have to pre-drill. So the next step then is, of course, tying in the side ledger boards, and again, this is an extreme overkill. You can see that I have angle brackets in there. I let the back ledger board go all the way to the wall, as you can see, and then this other is butted up against it. This one also has lags. That in itself is plenty of strength for the side support, but I bought them anyway, so I went ahead and used them. I have these angle brackets here, and that ties it in also. Plus, in addition, have the traditional end screws as well. I use 4-inch countersunk screws there, and definitely 4-inch screws need to be pre-drilled. They were so much harder to get in than the lag bolts, so definitely pre-drill those. And you notice there's no post here on the corner. By having the ability to put the lags in directly on the side, there's no need for a corner post. So that allows me to have this whole structure suspended without corner post, which was a big help. It looks better. You have less stuff on the floor, a little less claustrophobic. So one of the things that I discussed with my engineer friend was what kind of a span could I have here with this 2x8, because this is a garage, and obviously I'm going to want the front of the car possibly to pull up in the center of this, so I need about a 12-foot width here. And he confirmed that with a 2x8 that is plenty of strength out of the yellow pine to handle that span before the 4x4 post. And the same there for the other half of the garage. You have another 12-foot span there. And same thing on this corner. I have the 2 4-inch screws going in there. You can see where it is also braced with a bracket. Again, the bracket and those screws, a bit unnecessary, but I had them, so I used them. Okay, so put up the ledger board, put up the sideboards, and then obviously you need a few hands for this, but the next thing was putting up the front fascia board, which is the same as the back board. Now, one thing I will say, those are not 12-foot boards on the back. If anyone's doing the math, you'll see that that doesn't work out. Those are 10-foot. I got 10-foot for the back to make it easier to handle. So I have 3 10s and then the piece at the end. But on the front, these are 12. So I have 2 12s and then a larger piece at the end. So the seam was obviously designed to meet on the 4x4 post, and it's behind this plate. You can see the seam. This plate is unnecessary. I have screws under that plate into the 4x4, 4-inch screws going into this 4x4. That in itself is enough, but the plate just kind of dressed it up more than anything. I'll eventually paint this so the whole thing is a moot point anyway, but it adds some integrity to the seam, but you know, it's really just to kind of give it more of a finished look. So come along here to the other one, same thing. Make your next seam hit half of your 4x4 so that you can get your screws in there. And then the other goes to the wall, and you've already seen that. All right, so now you have your box. And then for supports, every 4 feet, starting at the other end, this one did not end up at 4 feet, 2x6s. Now the 2x6s are made out of white wood, and the white wood is very light, easy to handle, and more than strong enough to be support joists. So I used these 2x6 joist hangers here, and that made it just a breeze for attaching these things. So again, the floor was not on it yet. This was just an open box. And you hang these up, and those are 2.5 inch, actually 1.5. Those are 1.5 inch hex head screws. I'll show you all that in a moment, holding these hangers on. And when you buy these hangers, these are made by Strong Tie. They tell you exactly what to buy for attaching them. So you have 4 on that side. I don't know if you can see it. 4 bolts holding it on that side. Come around, you have 4 on this side. And then there was really no need for the hangers on the front because you have the ability to get on the outside here and throw 2 4-inch screws. So each of these 2x6 floor supports on the end has 2 4-inch screws all the way down. And that was one of the hardest things of this whole job, is getting those screws in. You have to pre-drill those screws. It's just an absolute nightmare. So what we did here, we intentionally made this joist butt up against the post to give us some extra support there. So let's talk about this post a second. This is a pressure treated 4x4 post, pressure treated for obvious reasons. While it is in a garage, you also want the ability to throw a hose in here if you have to, and you don't have to worry about your post getting wet. So 8 foot long, 4x4. You have to be careful with how you mount this on the base. I was originally going to just put this thing on the floor, and after talking to people I realized you don't need to do that. You never know when a car or whatever may hit this thing. So I got this base support, and this is just a steel support. You can see here that it's raised up off the ground roughly an inch, so that allows you to have water in your garage if necessary, and it will not, your wood will not be sitting in the water. Plus, that allows you to run a bolt in and support this thing in case you pulled a car in here and it hit it. So let me show you a close up here if you can see this. There's one single bolt in the middle of this square thing. Get over to the side so you can really get oriented of what you're looking at here. So you have an opening there. And what that is an anchor support. You drill a hole into the cement and you hammer this thing in, and it went in really easy. The hardest part was drilling the hole in the cement, but that literally took 2 minutes of drilling for this one hole. Drill a hole, hammer the insert in, and then that nut, as you tighten that nut, it expands kind of like a sheetrock anchor, and it anchors that post down. And then you just set your post on it, and then the same hex head 1 inch or 1.5 inches bolts. You have 3 on this side, you have nothing on that side, and then you have 3 over here, and those attach it. Let me show you what this was that I use. And again, that's another strong tie anchor, and it tells you exactly what to use. And then you just go to that aisle at your Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever you have. And this is what it was. I saved the bag to show you. It's a 1/2 inch diameter, 3 inch long insert made specifically for that type of thing. And if you look on the back, you have instructions that tells you exactly what kind of a drill you need. You can see there, you need a 1/2 inch cement drill, and they want you to drill down a 1/2 inch deeper than the 3 inches that you used. Now again, 3 inches was an overkill for what I did, but I didn't know that at the time. You could have gone a lot less than 3 inches, but it wasn't that much work to drill that hole. So anyway, you hammer it in. You can see there they're using a little punch to hammer it in, and then you just screw it 2 or 3 times, get it snug, and you're ready for your post to go on top. Screw your post on. So that had this thing perfectly stable, and obviously there is a lot of leveling to do in all of these things, and I recommend you get a laser level. That really helped out. You know, get your height, really it's this simple. Get your height on one corner, and then shoot a laser line all the way down, mark your line, find your studs, and that should have you level for your back ledger board. Now for the front, you know, my dad knew some tricks for making sure that this outside board was level. If anyone cares to have any more details about exactly how to do that, because you know, it's not really intuitive, some of the things that he did, that people that do this type of thing or have done this type of thing just know. Anyway, so I can give you more details if necessary on, you know, how exactly to do some of these things, but it's fairly self-explanatory. There are many ways to do it. Anyone with half a brain could figure it out without knowing how someone else did it, so no big deal. So you have your box, you have your supports, everything was ready. At that point, it was time for top of the shelf itself. So I used tongue and groove. You can see there, it's tongue and groove OSB board, 3/4 inch. This stuff is very heavy, very strong. Apparently it has the same strength as plywood. The only real difference that I could find in whether to use this OSB type board versus plywood was just the appearance. If you want to paint it, or if you don't want to paint it and you just like the look of plywood, then go with plywood, but do not choose plywood for any additional strength is what my research found. So, you know, it's up to you. Plus, you know, the money. 4x8 sheet of this stuff was a little less than $18 versus $30 for plywood, all 3/4 inch tongue and groove. So, you know, you're doubling your money with no real benefit. If it's in the house or you want a fine finish job, well, that's one thing. But just to have out here in the garage, you know, who cares? So, using 2.5 inch screws. These things are, you can see them in here. Use a star head screw. You do not want Phillips screw for this type of thing. These things are cut in, well actually they rip these things, the depth of it, and in order to have the tongue and groove oriented correctly, these things did not go long ways. You know, it's kind of counterintuitive that they would not go long ways, but you'll see what I mean when you see it. You can't just use the 8-foot long side of the sheet. You got to go in the opposite direction to make the counter or the tongue and groove work. And I think it's best to use tongue and groove because you just, for a shelf type situation like this, your seams just get a little more support. And so what you can see here is that the seams are all on top of the floor joists. Now you got the seam of the fascia board, but you can see those 2 screws is where a floor joist is, and the seam is sitting on top of it. So that allows you to come in here and screw your screws for each side of the wood So you can see 2 screws right in the middle. That's sitting right on top of the 2x6 joist. So it, allows your seam to be tied down, tightened, and you have support under each seam. Not only do you have the tongue and groove support, but it's sitting on top of the support joist under it. So it really ties this thing in and makes it super strong. Now, one thing that happened with us is, and this would maybe the same on any wall this long, again, this thing's like 34 feet long. The wall itself was not perfectly square down through there. It had some, side undulations as you went down through, and what that resulted in, when these plywood sheets were all cut to the same length as they should have been and put up, we had a lip over the front edge of this thing. What I mean is right here, this was not flush. So I had to run a chalk line on the front edge of this and then get a skill saw up here to trim the edge and make it flush. So that was a bit of unexpected work we had to do just due to the structure of the house that no one can do anything about. And it wasn't bad. In reality, a lot of people wouldn't even do it, but I wanted it to be as flush as possible. And also, I may come in here just to give it more of a finished look. I may put a strip of molding on the top, and if you do that, then you would certainly need for it to be flush. Now, one additional thing I may do, I haven't decided yet, just for safety reasons, I may come in on the top of this thing, on this front edge, and put some sort of a fairing strip or something to just to give a ledge on the front so that nothing could inadvertently slide off. So that's basically it. Put rails on this thing, and you have a loft or a deck. I mean, that's what we're looking at here. You can't really, doesn't do it justice to call this a shelf. And another reason for making it so strong is, this thing is 8 foot tall, so now I can come under it and have the, the support that I need to hang things on it. Who knows what I'll do under here. So this is so much more storage space and strength of storage space than putting a ceiling mounted system above your garage doors. And like I said, if you're looking at money, the quote I got was roughly $700. I have about $275 in materials here. Now, you obviously have to have the tools necessary to do this, otherwise you have to throw a little more money at it to get tools. But even if you bought every tool from scratch, you would not have near $700 in it, and you have a day's worth of work, and then you have storage well beyond anything you would get from a ceiling mounted system. So that's it. Here's an example of the screws we use, the 2.5 inch screws here. You can see they have a star head. Definitely use the star head. A Phillips, it will just strip on you. You just can't do it. So these screws were used in several different places where we just needed a little more of a bite after going through a 2x8 than a 2-inch screw would give us. Like these screws the 3/4 inch wood down on the flooring. Again, this is another star head, and all of these things you can see it comes with the bit you need. So these are 2-inch screws, and they were used again to screw the flooring down. These 2.5 inch screws were used in a few other places to where I didn't really want to use a 4-inch, but I needed a little more bite after going through a 2x8. And these are the 4-inch screws right here, and this was the nightmare of the job. 4 inches, a Phillip head. I would not ever recommend anyone doing that again. Try and find a star head. I couldn't find a star head, but definitely pre-drill. And I don't have one of these because I use them all, but these are the 1.5 inch hex head bolts that were used for doing most of the work related to the brackets, the strong ties, the post supports. Again, the Strong Tie is the company that makes these. They have a wall of these things at Lowe's or Home Depot, and on the tag they'll tell you, well, you can see here on the box, it's telling you all about the dimensions, and whatever bracket system you buy, it'll tell you which one to use. I had a few of these left over. These are the angle brackets that I used on the corner. And that's basically it. So there it is. If anyone has any specific questions about how to do some of the things we did, shoot me a message and I will certainly let you know. So I hope this helps give you just a basic flavor for what a floor mounted system looks like, how exactly you could do it, what is adequate since it needs to span the width of a garage door, and this thing should be here long after the house falls down, and really no weight restrictions on what to put up there, at least nothing I would find in my house. So that's it.